Right. Let's dive into a place that's really captured my imagination, Iceland. I mean, just picture it, volcanoes and glaciers, Viking history, meaning like modern science and technology. And, oh, you can't forget the Northern Lights. It's like something out of a dream. We've got a ton of great sources to dig into today, covering everything from its fiery geology to its culture and just what makes this economy tick.
It's a place that really does capture the imagination, doesn't it? And it's so interesting how Iceland's just dramatic landscape has shaped its history and its people, you know?
Absolutely. And speaking of dramatic landscapes, our sources really hit on Iceland's location right smack on the mid-Atlantic ridge. So what's the big deal about that? How has it shaped the country?
Well, being right on that mid-Atlantic ridge, it means that Iceland is basically sitting on this huge crack in the Earth's crust, like where two tectonic plates are pulling apart.
Oh, wow.
And that makes it incredibly volcanically active. I mean, there are over 130 volcanoes in Iceland.
930?
Yeah, some of which have had, like, a massive impact on the country's history and even the world.
Whoa, okay. So we're talking way more than just a few mountains with a little smoke coming out.
Right.
What kind of impact are we talking about here?
Well, I mean, just think about the Volcanic eruption back in 1783.
Oh, yeah?
It just spewed out massive amounts of lava and poisonous gases, you know, causing all this widespread famine. And it even affected the climate across Europe. Like, crops failed, temperatures dropped, and some historians even believe it played a role in, like, the social unrest leading up to the French Revolution.
Wow, that's a chain reaction I had never even thought about. But I mean, it's not all doom and gloom with volcanoes, right? Yep. Our sources mention that Iceland has actually become a world leader in using geothermal energy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they've really taken this volcanic activity and turned it into an advantage, using it to heat homes, power industries, and, you know, create those super famous geothermal pools that everyone wants to visit.
Right.
It's like the perfect example of turning a potential challenge into, like, a sustainable solution.
It's pretty incredible. They're basically living on top of this giant renewable energy source.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the people who call this wild and wonderful land home. We know that Iceland has this really rich history going all the way back to the Vikings. So what can you tell us about those early days?
Well, the sagas, those epic historical narratives, tell us that the first person to really settle there was a Norwegian chieftain.
Okay.
His name was Ingolfur Arnarsson, and he arrived in 874 AD. He established a settlement in, you know, what is now Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland.
So he just sailed over from Norway, saw this island, and was like, yep, this is where I'm setting up shop. That's pretty gutsy.
Yeah, it really is. And you know, over the next few centuries, more and more Scandinavians followed in his footsteps, seeking new opportunities and, you know, maybe escaping conflicts back home. They brought their language, their culture, their traditions, and really laid the foundation for what we know as Icelandic society today.
It's amazing to think about how these early settlers shaped the whole culture. You know, what really stands out to you about the way that Icelandic society developed?
I think one of the most remarkable things is the establishment of the Althing. It's Iceland's parliament, and it's considered one of the oldest, like, functioning legislative assemblies in the entire world.
Wow.
Yeah, it was founded way back in 930 AD, and except for this one short period, it's been meeting ever since.
That's over 1,000 years of democratic tradition. That's pretty impressive.
It is, and it just speaks to the Icelanders' commitment to self-governance and just their ability to, you know, work together to solve problems, even in really challenging times.
Yeah, speaking of challenging times, you know, life in Iceland hasn't always been a walk in the park, right? We've already talked about those volcanoes, but I mean, there were other hardships too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Imagine trying to survive in a place with those super long, dark winters and harsh weather, you know? And then on top of all that, occasional outbreaks of diseases like the Black Death and smallpox. Early Iceland was a true test of resilience and adaptability.
It's hard to imagine how they did it, you know, not only just surviving, but creating this thriving culture and society.
Well, I think part of it has to do with their really strong sense of community. They had to, like, rely on each other to survive those times.
Right.
To share resources, to support each other through difficult times. And, you know, that spirit of cooperation is really carried through to modern Iceland as well.
Absolutely. So from facing down volcanic eruptions to establishing one of the world's oldest parliaments, it sounds like Iceland's early history is like this incredible story of resilience and innovation. But that spirit of overcoming challenges, it didn't end with the Vikings, did it? Our sources mentioned that Iceland was hit hard by that major financial crisis back in 2008.
Yeah. The 2008 financial crisis really did hit them hard. But you know what's amazing is how they bounced back. They took decisive action, they diversified their economy, And they focused on those more sustainable industries, like tourism and renewable energy.
So they basically reinvented themselves. That's quite a feat.
Yeah.
But it seems like this ability to adapt and overcome, it's woven into the very fabric of Icelandic society, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it really makes you wonder how this history of resilience has shaped their culture and just their outlook on life.
That's a fantastic question, and one we'll definitely dig into further as we continue our deep dive into Iceland.
It's amazing, how Iceland's geographical isolation, it's had its challenges, but it's also fostered this really strong sense of community and self-reliance. Imagine being on this island in the North Atlantic, surrounded by, vast ocean, having limited contact with the outside world for centuries.
You'd really have to depend on each other and make the most of what you had, right?
Yeah.
How has that shaped their culture in the long run?
Well, they had to be resourceful and innovative just to survive those long winters and unpredictable conditions, right? Working together, sharing resources, coming up with creative solutions. That kind of environment really breeds resilience and ingenuity.
It makes sense. It's like they had to develop this, we're all in this together mentality.
Yeah.
But how does that play out in their culture today? Is it still just about being practical, or is there something deeper there?
I think it goes beyond just practicality. Look at their literary tradition, for example. Those sagas, those epic tales of heroes and adventures and family feuds, they were passed down orally for generations before anyone even wrote them down. And storytelling, it's still a huge part of Icelandic culture today.
Long winters, limited contact with the outside world. You'd have a lot of time to perfect your storytelling skills. Do you think those stories had another purpose beyond just entertainment?
For sure. They preserved their history, taught values, connected people to their shared heritage. It created the sense of community and belonging. And in a place like Iceland, that was crucial for survival.
So they helped build the social fabric of Iceland. It's incredible how something as simple as storytelling could have such a big impact.
And that emphasis on community and shared responsibility, I think it's carried over into how they approach social issues as well. Iceland always ranks really high in those global gender equality indexes. They were one of the first countries to let women vote, and they have a strong social safety net to support, families and individuals.
So basically, we take care of our own. It sounds like a pretty good system, especially with their history of facing challenges. Do we see that same spirit of innovation and resilience in other parts of Icelandic society today?
Oh, absolutely. Look at how committed they are to renewable energy. They've harnessed the power of their volcanoes and glaciers to become a global leader in geothermal and hydroelectric power. They're not just talking about sustainability, they're actually living it.
That's really impressive. It's like they're taking their unique circumstances and turning them into this roadmap for a sustainable future for everyone.
Exactly. And it's not just technology. They've put in a conscious effort to preserve their language and culture. Icelandic is very similar to Old Norse, the language of the Vikings.
Wow.
And they have this strong tradition of what we call linguistic purism. They create new words from existing roots instead of just borrowing from other languages.
Wait, so they're basically speaking Viking. That's amazing. But I imagine that must make it pretty hard to communicate with the rest of the world.
It does have its challenges, but they've managed to find a balance. They're very proud of their linguistic heritage, but they're also engaged with the global community. They're active in international organizations, they welcome tourists from all over, and they're really making a name for themselves in things like music, literature, and design.
It's pretty inspiring to see how they've held on to their unique identity while also embracing, the interconnectedness of the modern world. It's like they're saying, we're proud of who we are, and we're ready to share it with everyone.
Yeah, and they're doing it their own way, which is even more impressive. They're not trying to fit in or follow the crowd. They're doing their own thing, and it seems to be working for them.
It really makes you think, are there lessons we can learn from their approach? Maybe the rest of the world could use a little bit of that Icelandic spirit of resilience and community and innovation.
It's possible that we could all learn from them, from their willingness to, embrace their unique circumstances and create something really special.
I think you're right. It sounds like they figured out a few things about how to live a good life, even when facing some pretty serious challenges.
And speaking of living a good life, this brings up a question for our listeners. What aspects of Icelandic culture or society do you find most appealing, and how do you think those could be applied to, your own life or your community?
That's something to really think about. We often look to like bigger, more powerful nations for inspiration. But maybe we have a lot to learn from places like Iceland, too.
Exactly. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected places.
Well, Iceland has definitely given us a lot to ponder. We've covered so much, from volcanoes and sagas. But I'm curious to learn more about how Iceland is, like, making its mark on the world today.
Yeah, I agree. There's a whole other side to Iceland that's worth exploring. A side that showcases their creativity, their scientific advancements, and how they play a role on the global stage. And that's where we'll pick up in part 3 of our deep dive.
All right, we're back for our final look at Iceland. We've seen those amazing volcanoes, heard those Viking sagas, and uncovered how they've built such a resilient society. But there's got to be more, right? What else makes this little nation in the North Atlantic so special?
You know, it's pretty remarkable how Iceland, even though it's small and kind of isolated, has become a global leader in some pretty unexpected areas. They're not just using geothermal energy, they're making waves in science, art, and even international diplomacy.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Tell me more. Where do we even begin?
Oh, well, how about genetics? Iceland has this incredible resource, detailed genealogical records going back centuries, and a relatively homogeneous population. It's like a gold mine for researchers who are studying inherited diseases and human evolution.
Wait, so you're telling me their family trees are helping us understand our own DNA? How's that even possible?
It's true. Those records let scientists track genetic traits over generations, making connections that you just couldn't in more diverse populations. It's led to groundbreaking discoveries in areas like cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's, all because of Iceland's unique genetic history.
That's incredible. It's like their history is literally written in their genes. But it's not just about science, is it? I've heard Iceland's art and culture scene is getting a lot of attention internationally.
Yeah, you're right. Icelandic artists, musicians, and writers are becoming more and more well-known around the world. Their work often takes inspiration from that raw beauty of their landscape, their folklore, and that independent spirit that you find in their culture.
It really makes you wonder, is there something special in the air there, maybe in those geothermal pools, that sparks all this creativity? But really, what kind of impact are they having? Any names we might know?
Oh, definitely. The music scene there is particularly vibrant. Bands like Sigur Rós and Björk have achieved global fame. Their music has these ethereal soundscapes with haunting vocals that kind of echo that vastness of Icelandic nature. And in literature, authors like Halldór Laxness, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature, have really captivated readers with their stories about Icelandic life and identity.
Wow, they're making their mark everywhere in the creative world. It's like this little island is overflowing with artistic energy. But wait, you mentioned international diplomacy. I don't really picture Iceland as a major player on the world stage.
Remember back in 1986? That iconic image of Reagan and Gorbachev meeting in Reykjavik to talk about nuclear disarmament?
Oh, yeah?
Iceland was key in helping make those Cold War negotiations happen. It proved that even a small nation can make a difference in global peace efforts.
Now I remember that image. It's amazing to think about those two superpowers choosing Iceland as the place for such a historic meeting. What do you think brought them there?
Well, Iceland is neutral, has a reputation for peace, and has that stunning natural beauty. It probably helped create the right atmosphere for dialogue and cooperation, away from all the pressure of the global spotlight.
It's like they provided a safe space for diplomacy, a place where world leaders could breathe and find common ground. Have they continued that diplomatic tradition? Are they still active on the world stage?
Absolutely. Iceland is still a strong advocate for things like climate change, gender equality, and sustainable development. They use their platform to raise awareness, promote solutions, and inspire action. They're not afraid to speak up, even when it means challenging the way things are.
It's inspiring to see a nation living out its values on a global scale. They're showing that size doesn't matter when it comes to making a positive impact.
Exactly. And their story reminds us that we can all play a part in creating a better future, no matter where we're from or how small our voice might seem.
Iceland has really given us a lot to think about. From fiery volcanoes and Viking tales to scientific breakthroughs and global action, they've shown us what it means to be a truly exceptional nation.
They've definitely challenged our assumptions, broadened our understanding of what's possible, and inspired us to embrace that spirit of innovation and resilience.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Iceland, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from all of this?
I hope they'll remember that even a small island in the North Atlantic can have a huge impact on the world. Iceland's story is proof of human ingenuity, the importance of community, and that positive change is possible no matter where you are or what obstacles you face.
That's a great point. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey to Iceland. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into all the amazing things our world has to offer.